All right, awesome. And now we are live for open office hours today, Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. How's it going today, Andrew?
Good, Jacob. How are you doing?
Doing good. I'm not wearing a hat today. I think that's something to be said. I don't know. I always wear hats all the time now. Um, but yeah, we can get started. So I want to welcome everybody for being here. Thanks for joining us today. If this is your first time, this is a time of the week where we take an hour to listen to your questions, listen to your problems, and help you solve them. And so we do that together. So whether you have something about design, idea validation, something about your startup, or maybe something with software development, we'll do our best to answer those. But it's definitely not our expertise for the two of us. But we can connect you with the right people if needed. So my name's Jacob Miller. I'm the marketing and brand manager at Headway, and I help host events like this. We had a couple other live streams this week as well, and I also help with like any of the writing and all the things that happen with marketing at Headway. So if you have any questions about marketing, I'm happy to answer those as well. And now I can hand it over to Andrew, and he can tell you a bit about himself.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. So I'm Andrew Verbancourt, partner and CEO at Headway, and um, excited to really use this time to share our knowledge and experience. Obviously, with any advice we give, mileage may vary. This is based on our experiences and our experimentation and things that have worked well for us or not worked well. And so really giving you feedback in our at Headway, we're coming on 6 years of business, helping both startups and corporate innovation teams. So we bring that lens and really, my background is in startups as well. So I've been a part of a handful of different startups, after college in the 2000s into the 2010s, and here we are in 2020. So bringing that kind of perspective of being a part of founding teams that have helped raise capital, being part of teams that are maybe a little bit further along, and yeah, just excited to help lend any insight that's valuable to those as you're on your journey.
Awesome. Well, so if anybody has a question, you can leave it in the chat. And if you have like one that's a little bit more complex, as you see, there's this little scrolling thing at the bottom here. We can actually send you a link to hop on the call and we can have a conversation about it if you feel like it's too hard to describe for the chat. Um, awesome. Yeah, David, if you want to join the call, I see you have a question on YouTube there. We can send you a link. So if you would like to do that, just say yes and we can share a link with you. But otherwise, feel free to share it in the chat. Um, but I think in the meantime, before we jump into that, we do have one question that we'll kind of jump into as David kind of gathers his thoughts. It looks like this first question is from Reddit here. Um, so they shared they're struggling to connect customer support insights with the product team. And they share a specific challenge that I'm working on at the moment is connecting customer support to the product team. Customer support has so much information about how to make the product better. Our current system is okay, but I'd like to improve the communication between support and product. And if anyone has a particularly good setup that they can share, I'd love to learn from you. And on the other hand, if you have any good articles, books, courses, or frameworks on improving communication between support and product, it would be super helpful. And I'm grateful for any recommendations. So, Andrew, what do you think? Yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I have direct experience with. So one of the roles right before Headway, and actually one of our first customers as Headway was working with a customer support team to really figure out um, how we solve tickets faster. And this was in the context of a internet service provider. So they were getting calls all the time about, modems being down or troubleshooting modems, or my internet's not working, or, I have a quiz I need to do for online school, and like I can't, my internet doesn't work. Help. And so what we did is actually sit down with the customer support team, and we ran some really key design sprints with them to really understand, like, how do we build our base knowledge and foundation and really build a relationship with them that we're one team, rather than thinking of it as customer support and also product and then design and then development, really like coming together to build that cross-functional team to own the user experience together and really build that empathy of like, hey, if we don't fix this stuff in the software, our customer support team is answering the same questions over and over and over again. And so, that's leading to a bad experience for our users. So really owning that together and really changing the mindset from you tell me what you're getting and then I act on it and then we move it on, and try to build more lines of communication open. But so we ran some initial design sprints that helped us understand both the managers, so the people who are leading the customer support teams, how did they measure success of their roles? Like how did they know they were doing a good job? And then what sort of metrics did they have in place for their team? And for customer support teams, it's usually like mean time to close. So like how long is someone on the phone with you before you close it, or how long is someone on chat before you close it? How many things have been escalated on? And I think the thing that helped us the most is going to the managers, going to the techs, and actually shadowing them and understanding their goal. And we kind of took it at it from a like two uh, like a two-step point of view, where we wanted to get what they thought of the experience and things. And we got access. They were using Zendesk at the time, so our whole design team got access into the tools and into the tickets that were happening. And so we could sort them and really identify by keyword and start to look at, hey, where can we align the pain points of our customers and what they're calling in for to the roadmap that we have on the product, and understand like how big a pain is this? Are people ignoring the problem? Are they calling and surfacing it? The other thing that we did with the customer support team, and this was unique because the software we were working on designing included the customer support as part of it. So the operating and monitoring systems that we were creating, the team used, and so we observed them solving the problems as well. So that really helped us to understand like how do you answer calls? How do you find answers to those calls when we don't have a canned response or an answer for a client or for a customer? How do we resolve it? And that helped us to really build those lines of communication and really let them know that we cared, like not just to solve the problem, but we cared about their work experience too, and owning in that customer solution. So I would say, you know, having dedicated time to work in customer support. And I've seen this a lot with different companies, different startups as well, where they'll have, as part of their onboarding, if you have customer support, they'll have people sit in and shadow on, well, hey, what are customers calling about? What are the pain points? How do we treat our customers? All of those things. So I would recommend trying to get some time on a frequent basis, every week, maybe every 2 weeks, with customer support team, where maybe you're not answering calls, but you're just shadowing and you're uncovering, getting access to their tools. And then maybe if there's a way where you're trying to translate those customer support insights into action for the product team, making sure you're aligned on how they're tagging and maybe what keywords they're using, and what's going to help you leverage kind of the overall insights that they're gathering that you're not sitting in for, what systems and approaches are going to help you understand like what's high priority, what's not, what are some common themes, and get access to that data. So I don't know of any specific articles or frameworks um, that will give you more insight on that. I think just, as a team, like coming together, and as I mentioned, being a cross-functional team that owns that problem and really cares about that customer experience, and also, the experience that your team members have, is probably the biggest thing that you can do in scheduling time to either, if you don't have time to sit in with customer support reps, or anyone from the support team, just setting up a call or maybe setting up a stand up every week or two and say, hey, what are the common themes, and of this new fix that we put out, are we still getting problems, bubbled up in support, and so try to align roadmap, and figure out, hey, of what we deployed in the last month, are we decreasing support tickets? Are we increasing clarity for our customers? And then trying to see, what's coming up, or what's still a problem, or what needs to change. Hope
Oh,
you
I got
muted.
I got muted again for some reason. Well, that's a great stuff in there. It kind of made me think about even so last week we had our hack week for team week, and just how it's so important for everyone on the team to understand what the pain points are of customers, because otherwise, yeah, it's just the silos start to happen, and the longer you're in that silo, the longer you might be going in the wrong direction, all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely eye opening for me to like be practicing that last week. So that was a good time. So yeah. For anyone that's watching, if you haven't watched, we actually did startup pitches. So we had 1 week to basically bring a startup idea to life as far as we could within like 4 to 5 days. We had 3 teams, and so we actually have a video on our channel. If you head to our channel page, you'll find it'll say hack. Like on the graphic, but we had a startup pitch competition. It was a ton of fun. So you can see how we kind of broke down pitching ideas, validating ideas, talking to customers, all that kind of stuff, discovering pain points. It was a good time. Oh, awesome. We got a bunch of questions from David. All right. There's a couple things in here. David, you're definitely welcome to to join us on the call if you want to, but otherwise we can start just kind of going through these comments here. Let me just switch to the comments. I can share them on screen. So as he was sharing, we have a client that is willing to scale up our team for several months through professional services. It's great because they see our value as a company, but increasing the headcount is very hard. Um, so here's the questions for conversation. Uh, what would you find the most relevant to enable an agency or freelancers to join us in the work to have that temporary turbo? Um, so talking about effective team augmentation on a project for a couple months. Um, what would be tips for a great customer of a company like Headway despite our internal chaos? How do you approach training, especially in tech and design, when speed and pressure mean new people coming in on board so quickly? Yeah, we can share a link with you, David. Just one second here.
Yeah, all great questions, and all all things that, a lot of teams that find product market fit or scale up for potential clients really quickly, have you know they have these problems for sure. And so, yeah, excited to dive in a little bit on how we approach them and what our recommendations are, being in being in that scenario many times over Headway's history, and in some of the cases, today as well.
Just waiting a moment here for David to join. Welcome, Celino. Always good to have you here. I feel like every time we're live, you're here, which is great. Yeah, hopefully we can answer some of that and unpack some of that with David to see what kind of his struggles are, and hopefully we can help out. It's definitely not a simple task by any means, no matter how you look at it, but awesome. He's probably setting up his mic and camera and stuff, I'm sure. And David, if you're listening, you don't have to show your video if you don't want to. Definitely fine to just do audio. There he is.
Hi.
Hey,
Welcome.
David.
Okay. No problem. Um, yeah, this is strange, but it's nice joining you. Thanks for
Yeah, thanks
having
for
me.
coming on.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, as you see, most of my questions are related to how to scale the team on a temporary basis. Like ideally, as you grow as a company, then you want to get the people on board in your company full time, like as regular employees. But in this scenario, sometimes it takes time, or sometimes, like in our case right now, we have a customer that says, "Yeah, I really want some of those features ship faster. So can I?" Hire you through some professional services so that your product grows faster. And I would say, yeah, sure, that's great. But then once they say yes, the problem is how do we do it? And also part of the question there is how acknowledging that we have a lot of chaos as a company because I don't know, it's part of growing. Um, how are you not like a crappy customer to your freelancers, contractors, or an agency you work with? So it's kind of like several phases of the same problem, right? And you always want to play nicely with your team, your coworkers, and your vendors as well. So that's like an open question. I don't know if you can think I can phrase a little better. Please let me know.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And as I mentioned, as you were hopping on, something that we've been thrown into before, and a part of. I think the biggest thing, just to answer your first question, um, what would you find the most relevant to enable an agency or freelancers to join us in the work? I think being super clear, we talked a little bit about cross-functional teams. In that last
Mhm.
answer, I think understanding, really building an understanding, even though they are an agency or freelancer, of like, how do we measure success as a team? How can we own that end result for our customers? Like, yeah, shipping the feature or accelerating the roadmap or augmenting our team is important, but how can we take more ownership and understanding of that problem we're solving? And so in our experience, we're most effective if we're joining a team or a company, to really accelerate some efforts if we bring kind of our full product team there, where we have product design and dev running and owning a problem, or owning the integrations with a particular client, or owning something like that, where you have kind of that cross-functional team that's together. Where we've seen things go bad is when, hey, things are on fire, grab a bucket, and there's not really that communication. There's not understanding of like, what does success look like? How are we getting there together? And when you have internal chaos, at a company that's growing fast, not knowing who to talk to as a vendor, right? Or even having the mind space of the team, or the attention of the people you need to get the answers you need to, is a problem. So that's why our preferred approach when we enter engagements like this is trying to really bring that full product team, where we can understand initiatives, what success looks like, and then kind of take some of the burden and own the problem alongside the client, versus just, us being design or dev effort, where you say, hey, go do this, or grab a ticket from the backlog, right? Like having that higher understanding of what the outcomes are, is good, for anybody, for an agency or a freelancer, obviously, to be a part of that team and understand, we have a product team model that we've created that we try to align on all of our projects. And so just understanding the roles and responsibilities. I'll pull up a quick example, just to give you an idea. But understanding the roles and responsibilities of the team that's working together, who has autonomy over this, who doesn't, who do we need to, let me just share this real quick. Who do we need to talk to, or maybe reference? So here's an example of kind of this product team. And so we normally would take this and then start to assign. There might be multiple people in each category. You might have a tech lead, but then understand who owns each pillar of these, as we're going to really own a problem, alongside the customer. So, being super clear, right? Communication, expectations, what success looks like, all of those things.
Okay. And how do you, so once the problem is solved and you kind of scale the team, what are some takeaways that you can take, take from that collaboration, so that some of the knowledge of the expertise kind of gets back into the company? Like, how do you see the relationship between the knowledge transfer process, or the retention of knowledge inside the company through these efforts?
Yeah, in our experience, that kind of goes into this specifically. Training is either having people you want to. So if your current processes aren't set up for success, things are kind of chaotic. Having a team with expertise and running product teams is definitely important, and kind of injecting some of those processes and approach. So we've been a part of this many times, where we'll help integrate and implement a design system and a process for design ops, and how we work with dev alongside your team. So that might, that product team model I showed you might actually consist of both teams, but it's kind of around the same effort, where you do training and stuff. We, Headway specifically, we have engagements where we will do explicit, pair programming for development and pair design for designers, where we're helping coach alongside. So it's not, hey, we're just doing the work and then going away and you lose that. It's kind of, alongside and very collaborative. So in those cases, it's been pretty natural to have a break, where there's not, hey, Headway does the work, there's a break, and now we move forward. It's more of a, we're doing this together and helping build understanding and build clarity. And then, when it's time, when we reach our objective, then we can, roll down without any issues or lags. There are also times, though, where things need to get done sooner than later. We don't have the luxury of training, as we go, or bringing people along, where there is kind of more of an explicit effort. And then there's perhaps a period of 2, 4, 6 weeks where there's more of that knowledge transfer and sharing around, here's the processes and approaches and how things can move, going forward.
Okay. So one final question would be, in the technical part, like inside the coding, how do you adapt or sort of integrate within the tools or specific peculiarities of the code at that organization? Like, just to give you an example as to what I'm thinking about is, so we're mostly a Ruby shop, but we don't do Rails. So we have a little bit of Padrino, and then a little more sort of functional Ruby, which is most people would say it's not idiomatic. And so you get like these philosophical conversations about the code and the libraries and so on. And that usually tends to be a problem. Uh, Hiring people. So
Mm-hmm.
once we find people are really attracted into the kind of way we work, it works really well. But there's like this adaptation process. So and I suppose that case repeats itself in companies in many different versions. This is just like ours. So how do you work around those sort of topics, or how you actually maybe just define trade-offs and it's just like we simply do not respect them, or just like I don't know. It's like an open question as to how in the end it ends up being two different teams or two different organizations with different historical contexts around that code and how they produce it.
Yep.
So how does that interaction play?
Yeah, I think it goes back to communication and just understanding. For us, we ran into that a few in architecture, in code choices as we're
Mm-hmm.
implementing new libraries. I mean, ultimately, the choices you've made got you here. Everything can't be, with how fast tech's changing, everything can't be a rewrite. Everything can't be, well, now there's a new best practice, even though we've poured in thousands and thousands of hours into the old way, like we're going to switch, right? That has to be an organizational choice, and there has to be a very good reason behind it. So things become suboptimal by making optimal choices today, right? Without seeing the big picture and that poll of all the customers. So in our experience, just aligning, the tech leads, the architects together around,
Mm-hmm.
and less ego of like, I can't believe you did this, and more of, hey, here's why we made this decision, and build that empathy between each other and say, well, going forward, here's kind of how we're going to handle it together, and creating that alignment's the most important thing. Otherwise, you do get those everyone's opinions different, and the highest paid person, it's their choice versus
Mm-hmm.
versus someone else's. So I think just making sure you have that explicit space carved out to understand how you make decisions today. And it sounds like with things maybe
Mm-hmm.
fast moving, it might not be well documented, so like having a session to get that documented and say, hey, moving forward and for the next 3, 6, 12 months, here's kind of our preferences as a team, and that's by constraints of time and money and resources and people and all of the things. Like, you can't always paint a perfect picture of, now there's this new shiny tech out there that we should use. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, and you have to kind of continue with what you have. So
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So to trying to rephrase and see if I got it, it says like yeah, you would sort of building before the explicit documentation around those preferences and constraints, and kind of explaining why you took them and what's like defining the frame where you can get out of those rules or not, and
yeah.
but mostly out of being explicit.
Yeah, and I think the same thing is true for when we onboard people to Headway. Everybody has different experiences, different preferences, tools they've used. So we try to do an onboarding. Hey, here's what we've tried and why it didn't work for us in our use case, and here's why we moved on to something different, to build that
Mm-hmm.
understanding versus not answering to the friction of, well, why aren't we using this tool, or why aren't we using this tech, or why are we turning here? Because everyone's situation's different, and everyone has a different starting point. And as tech moves fast, so sometimes things move in as like a proof of concept into something that maybe isn't really an explicit tech choice, but now we're
Mm-hmm.
supporting this other library that isn't anywhere else in the code base. So just understanding the reasoning behind it has helped us, I think, to build that understanding across the team of, well, how do we get here and what have we tried? And, not to thwart recommendations of people moving forward, but to just say, we're where we are because of these reasons. And like for us to go somewhere
Mm-hmm.
else, like this is what guided those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Um,
Versus trying to ignore it, right? And then you get into those tech conversations where you just have a difference of opinion and you agree to disagree, but can't move forward in confidence together.
mm-hmm.
Ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
it's about that end goal. Is the tech and doing it the right way, or the most
Mm-hmm.
optimal way, right for now? Or you're really trying to using tech in service of your clients and your business. You're not using tech for tech's sake. You can't be
Mm-hmm.
a purist. I've said this before, but like design wants to do more design and high fidelity design, development wants to do more development, strategy wants to do more strategy, but it's really converging on that business goal, and what problem are we trying to solve, and how do we use that craft together. That's going to help make
Mm-hmm.
make the most impact. So
Okay, great. I think I'll shoot you an email so this doesn't become like a sales call.
Oh yeah.
It was great talking to you, and thanks for inviting me on the call and answering my questions. I'll just stay connected to see who else has something interesting to learn.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks,
Okay,
David.
Thanks, David.
bye
All
guys.
right.
Have a
See ya.
nice day.
Added him back on accidentally. He removed himself. Um, all right, we actually have a question from Celino as well. So the first, he kind of had it's kind of a two-part a little bit. Um, and he's asking Headway, where has design ops fit within your usual service contracts? I know startups often like to skip things like UX research, test-driven development, the stuff that would likely bite you in the butt. And then he shares, but I'd like you to talk about design ops and how your customers have reacted to the idea as a paid step in your service. So like, the idea it's we do a holistic model versus a singular thing
Hmm.
type of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I think coming back to that product team model, um, it really is going to depend on. I guess for us, it falls in line. So when we're doing design system work or we're working with an existing team, understanding the process and being clear about it is super helpful. And so for us, like that design operations is part of it. Like if you're managing a design system, what gets into the system versus not into the system, how are approvals made, who bubbles that up to the dev team? Is dev part of those approval discussions, as we think about new patterns and things that need to be decided. So for us, it's typically alongside. I mean, just speaking loosely about Headway's engagement model, uh, we're flexible and agile by design because we want to welcome in those constraints as we work with people. So, there's some teams that might work on a very rigid scope that might, want to define out, hey, we're going to design these 5 screens and you're getting 2 iterations of each of them. And then like our engagement's done. Ours is much more, we'll include those as like part of the initiative, but we welcome that kind of opportunity for us to work inside the teams, to work with constraints and to carve out some other outcomes. And so we'll usually have more of here's the outcomes from this engagement and what that looks like, and kind of give ourselves and the client permission to change the way we engage based on new information. And so we'll amend those a lot, or just via email be able to just have a paper trail and confirm, hey, we're also going to work inside of this team and we're going to help coach up, and here's what that looks like. And it adds time and cost to the engagement, and here's the additional time. But we try to avoid that and really create these more flexible engagements that are on, let's say a team of 2 designers with a design lead and a senior designer who's also running, for let's say a 12-week engagement with here's our key initiatives and efforts and how we're going to measure success for that. So design ops fits, pretty well inside of what we're doing. If we're going to, um, yeah, what's the question? Do they get the value of design ops immediately, or is it a sell like UX? I would say it depends on the team, right? And the question we like to ask is, what pain are you feeling? Like where are things frustrating, or where's there a lot of friction? Well, our design team's designing stuff that never gets built, and our dev team's, complaining about the stuff design's handing over. And so there's communication issues that you can start to uncover, where dev just ultimately is too far behind, or there's not enough collaboration between design and dev in an operations model to understand like what constraints do we have from a delivery standpoint that we should keep in mind in design. And so usually it's looking for those pain points. And I would say in the cases where we do design ops, it's been either existing teams taking too long, like from a design perspective, taking 10, 12 weeks to design out prototypes for a simple 5 to 7 screen flow, and just doing one iteration of that in that amount of time. So it's like, what are the other goals that are going to help their business move forward that we could tie back to design ops, and kind of digging into what does it mean if we were to prototype faster? Like how does that change the backlog? Do we have the velocity from a dev perspective? What does it mean from a business perspective and user growth? How can we help them make decisions faster by using design as a tool? And so I would say in those cases where it's framed up in that way, the process and the operations of the design team is really important, and how we get buy-in and how we collaborate with product and design together. But if it's, a very pointed, hey, we want you to design this one screen, I would say it's a much harder sell. Like UX, or like, trying to build someone's understanding. So really starting outside in will help you to find out where you can help, and what that looks like. And so for us, using that product team model that I shared is really, where would we start of all the capabilities that Headway has in product and design and development? Where do we start, and what does that team look like, and where do we see the risk in your delivery model and how you're serving clients and all of that? So I would say it depends on what engagement you're going into. If you go in with a visual design effort and you try to upsell them to UX and to all these things that they didn't know they needed, that definitely would be a harder sell, and probably involve more people. But if you can identify those pain points up front, definitely be, it's beneficial to you and the customer. I'm not sure if that's answering your question, Celino, or um, if there's anything I can do to be a little bit clearer, maybe more pointed.
Awesome. Well, I think we can, while we wait for any kind of response from him, we can probably jump to another question. It's actually, I think a common one, and maybe people don't think about it, but this one's from Reddit, and this one is about. Oops, not that one. We already answered that one. There we go. Getting your first users. So how to tell if the problem or the pain is bad enough that somebody will pay for it. So they share, hey everyone, working on getting the first users for a prototype we built. Something I'm not sure if that there's some kind of essay that they were mentioning where founders do unscalable things to get users. Where even though they obviously were onto something, so Airbnb kind of did that, like a concierge type thing, and it was difficult to get their first ones. So the question is, how do we tell the difference between the normal difficulty in getting users and the other scenario where the problem is just not as intense when users aren't willing to pay to fix that problem and it doesn't matter that much to them? So any clarity here would be much appreciated. Thanks.
That's a good question. I would say, the thing, and we've talked about a lot in some of these sessions, and like we are trying to change behavior. We're trying to change what someone's used to, whether they're like Airbnb is an example. Everyone was used to hotels. Like, would you even sleep in someone else's bed, right? They had all these assumptions around it. And so, for them, going slow, and recommend this for any entrepreneurs, like getting really close to your users and understanding why they buy and why they don't. We use this analogy a lot of trying to open a door of opportunity for users. So with your prototype, trying to craft an offer and try to craft some sort of solution type test where you can figure out if they want it or not. And so um, the difference between getting first users and another scenario where it's not that intense, I think there's other ways to do it, right? There's different business models that can support where people aren't willing to pay for it, but they do it, like Facebook, like Twitter, like Instagram. No one pays for those things, but it's valuable for them to do, and they're supported by ads, and they weren't always, but they had a vision for that. So I think understanding what type of play you have, and whether or not people are paying for or used to paying for things now. I think there's even, talking more about social networks, there's even some examples where people are creating private social networks where you have more privacy, your data doesn't get sold, and people are willing to pay for that because the privacy matters to them. There's other people out there that the privacy doesn't matter, and so they're not willing to pay for anything else. But maybe if their family was on it, they would pay, right? And so those changing contexts are going to determine how difficult it is to get someone to pay. I'm just trying to read over, and I think he was talking about PG as in Paul Graham, one of his essays around do things that don't scale. I think it also will depend on the amount of capital that you need. If you're building a startup that's freemium or that's free to start and supported by ads, you're going to need a lot more runway to be able to figure out, what continues to get people to pay. How do you improve retention? How do you make sure that, you're bought into or understanding of how the ad world works. And so like digging into CPM or cost per thousand impressions, digging into, what those price points are, your model is just going to look a lot different. And so that's where you get into trouble with places like Facebook and Twitter, where and even Instagram, where they're moving buttons around that you're used to, right? They move the feed around, so that you would click on things sooner, like the store, to try and optimize like their payments. They do these small tweaks to try and get people to either stay in the app or discover new features that really aren't humane design, right? They're trying to trick you. They're trying to pull a bait and switch on you based on what you're used to. And so if you're doing a freemium play or a free play that's supported by ads, you're going to try and grab as much time or as many page views from somebody as possible. And that's really dependent on, what your app does for them. If you're going for a paid, let's say a paid model, you want to get somebody from, their time to value from, hey, I signed up, now I, got to my successful outcome in as short as time as possible. You're not really incentivizing you doing this kind of behavior hacking, where you're keeping them in this loop to be addicted to, like Twitter. When you load up Twitter, there's a delay from when the notifications turn on, right? And so you kind of have this anticipation when you load Twitter, and then the notification bubble will come on. Or if you, same thing with Instagram, to see like, oh, what changed, and get that dopamine hit. So I would say, depends on your model and your industry. Would definitely be able to add some more insight and advice, if we knew what the problem was. But I think the big thing is looking at the substitutes and what other people are doing, how other people are serving that same user, today.
Awesome. Right, we got another one we can go through as well. I think this one we've had some experience with folks going through this process before working with us. But outsourcing your MVP as a startup, what are things that needed to do to put in extra work in order to make sure everything goes well? So they share, currently building a startup in the fintech space. For the MVP, I want to outsource to a development company. Has anybody had experience in outsourcing the development of a startup? And if so, what was your experience doing this? And what are the things I need to do to put in extra work to make sure it goes well?
Yeah, I mean, this obviously, as Headway, like a lot of teams outsource their MVPs to us, right? And so we've seen companies that have gone offshore or nearshore and come back. And I think that the big thing that we talked about earlier is just the ownership over the problem, right? Not being just a design shop or just a dev shop that's going to do what you say, but that's going to have a process in place to get feedback from users, to interview them, to understand how they're engaging with your app on the platform, and really help you build a more effective product versus saying, oh, I'm gonna save money by going to a dev shop here or anywhere else, where they're just gonna develop what's in your head. They're not gonna help you test that against the market or test that against users. And so where we see the most success here, both at Headway and with other companies, is making sure that you have a level of agreement on, we do future perspectives on like, hey, what do outcomes look like? What does success look like for us, for our customers, and for this venture? And how do we all own in that together and come around the problem? Just like you saw, Jacob, last week in, starting a startup, like that sort of vibe where we all have a perspective, we have our craft of strategy, design, development, marketing. How do we apply that to the business model that, in the business that we're working on, versus just dev on its own? And so where we've seen this go bad is when, a founder sends over a requirement doc and said, here's exactly how, what I want to build. I know it's going to work. Just tell me how long and how much it's going to be, and, let me know when it can be done. And that's definitely one way to learn. It's going to be the more expensive way to learn, because you're going to learn about all the hiccups and hurdles once you launch that, and you're not really building. I think there's a big movement too, Jacob, maybe you could speak to this, around building brand and community at the same time of building your product. So rather than just building a product and moving on, doing that customer development like the lean startup way, and really starting to add value to that community before you have an offering, and to build a brand around it. Like, what do you stand for? Why are you going to be different? And that maybe goes into a little bit of Simon Sinek's, like, start with why, and the purpose behind brands, and the purpose behind your company isn't just to make money, it's to make an impact and to make, a lot more things. I don't know if you had anything, Jacob, from a brand standpoint that,
Yeah.
outsourcing development isn't going to do. So it's kind of on you unless you find a partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It reminds me of there was an article that somebody had tweeted, and it was about their experience of like basically they didn't go past 10 customers until they knew that they had like the problem and solution figured out. So and that was so they had like a kind of a core group of 10 customers that they got and built a community around those 10 people. And those all, they were all sharing things together and learning together. And basically the idea is like you're creating these power users, like who are the people that are most likely to get the most value out of your product? Because that does a couple of things. One, it helps you improve your product as you're creating it and building it before you go public with it. Because nothing wrong with going public sooner than later. Because I think obviously you'll always iterate and improve a product over time. But if you can really like figure out before going, doing that big launch, like really like nail the problem and the features and the benefits and all that stuff, I think that's super helpful. I know that sometimes it's hard to do that because it's like, hey, there's timelines and all this stuff. But I thought it was a really interesting story. I think I'm assuming they bootstrapped it. So they had more flexibility there, but they basically had 10 users, and they were able to like understand their target market, make the product better over time. They were still making revenue because I'm assuming that they were paying for the product, but they knew that the product would just improve over time with them. Maybe they had some kind of deal where like, hey, you get a locked in price, something like that. But yeah, there's something to be said about building a community around your product. It's not true for every product that like building a community. I don't think it fits in every industry and every solution. But if there's an opportunity to do it, you should. And a lot of marketers and just a lot of folks in startups, like you should be talking to customers every week and just having that cycle. So outsourcing the development, whether it's inside your country or not, you still have to have those feedback loops and having that happen. Otherwise, like you'll go too far in the wrong direction and you're spending a lot of money going in the wrong direction, right? So there's no like perfect plan for that. I think that's something that we talk about a lot here. It's like there's no blueprint for success for every single product, every single problem, every single target market. You just have to like take every month, like just revise what you're doing, understand where you need to go next. We went this way for 30 days, it's not working. Let's like figure out where we can go next. And yeah, so I think even last week, in a matter of 4 days of taking trying to solve a problem and create a product as a solution, it's amazing what you can even get done, what you learn in a week and how you kind of pivot your thinking. And even so, like even after 4 days, like our team was confident in a certain solution, but I also was like, you know what, like I don't think we're hitting the mark yet. Like we're in the right direction, but we're not quite to the point where we're like ready to sell a product. So like we can pitch the idea and the sentiment of the solution, but it might not be quite ready yet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and there's a good example of that, working with a small subset of users. It's not, getting a launched app isn't the goal. It's learning enough so that people are successful with it. So there's a good tweet here from Suhail, who was the founder of Mixpanel and is now building Mighty, that I think aligns well. Let me just pull this up real quick. That aligns well. At long last, we finally reached a milestone we set out to 18 months ago. 10 happy users who don't want to go back, use the product for hours every day, and pay for it. Right. And so like getting to this point is more than just building version 1. It's more than, right, there's a lot of behavior, there's a lot of decision making that happens, there's a lot of things that go into building a successful product that people use and love. And more often than not, it's about learning the perception, it's learning, what do people actually value, and less about the tech or the development itself.
I think that was the tweet I saw. So maybe it wasn't an article, or maybe I saw an article at some point. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Celino actually has a question. He was just asking if we've seen an uptick in business from West and East Coast customers. So I'm assuming Silicon Valley, like probably New York City, during the pandemic. Has the boom in remote work opened up business for teams like ours that are stateside?
Yeah, we started in Headway actually working with West Coast clients. So we started with a company based out of San Francisco as our first client, and so we've been probably most heavily on the coast already. With more recently working a lot in logistics and some manufacturing and consumer packaged good companies that are based here in Wisconsin and in the Midwest. But for us, it hasn't really changed. I think the perception of a lot of teams where you had to be in office, either in San Francisco or, in other places that are here, even in Wisconsin, you had to be in office in order to be effective as a consultant or as a team member, I think have been squashed, with the past year. So I think that's maybe not more opportunities, but more potential, for people that are open to not having people relocate or not having people, placed on site or things like that when you think about working with teams. So for us, I would say less uptick in business, but more potential, for for work, and who we can help, and based on their preferences and principles around how they work with teams.
All right. I think we got one more question from Reddit that we'll kind of walk through. I think it's kind of interesting because I think this applies to any team. But it's about the operational side of growing a startup. And they share, I recently became involved in a startup and I'm trying to organize the operational side of things now that it's growing. Does anyone have ideas or suggestions on how we can better link up the different departments? I've noticed there's a lack of communication between different teams, mainly because everyone's so busy and they don't all use the same software for each department. So I'm assuming each team has their own kind of process and software. And so no one's all in one singular kind of source of truth. And in particular, they like to better link up sales and finance department for billing. So they're asking about sales. They use sales. Sales uses HubSpot to manage their work. And maybe there's a feature in there I'm not aware of. I'm an office manager. I'm not involved in that side of things. So it looks like they're trying to basically help connect the dots for all the teams, so that they can uh, kind of reduce that silo problem. Oh, I don't know if Andrew, if you froze on me.
Am I frozen for you, or am I just taking a
Yeah,
really long drink?
you are very thirsty or very tired with the coffee.
Oh, interesting. Can you still see me?
Yeah, it's just a black box, but we can hear you. Let's see if we can get you. Sorry, folks. Andrew froze up for some reason. I'll be back in a second here. That awkward silence of just me on the stream.
Oh,
It's
I'm
got
not
Ryan's
sure
picture.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, so it's because Ryan has logged in. There you go. That's better. All right. Awesome. Yeah, so I guess
There we go.
thoughts, there we go. Thoughts on the operational side of growing a startup.
Yeah, I've recommended to a lot of founders EOS, and there's some other approaches, holacracy and stuff that try to build flat orgs and more transparent orgs. At Headway, we use EOS, and so there. Each department has a scorecard. You have a weekly meeting. In EOS, one of the tenets and principles is having an integrator, somebody who integrates across all of through all of the departments. Somebody who's in. So EOS has this weekly meeting pulse, and it's not weekly for every department. Sometimes it's every 2 weeks, and sometimes it's only a subset of the team and maybe the leadership team. But it's called an L10, where you sync up every week, and you go through your goals as a company. You go through your rocks, you go through a scorecard for your department, you talk about to-dos, and then you have this time for issue solving where you can really discuss big topics and things that for your department. But for Headway and for anyone doing EOS, you have an integrator that's essentially involved in all of these level 10 meetings that can then uncover and understand how the scorecards from different departments overlap, and where we can start to build more, or to, I guess, tear down more walls between departments, and where we need to collaborate. So I think getting something in place where you can identify issues for a department and then share those would also, you know, you're probably doing all hands, but maybe there's an opposite thing of all hands, where you can have an issue, a time where you share issues from each department. Hey, here's something we're struggling with. Maybe it's the leads, and then you kind of come together as a whole. And for us, our leadership team comes together every week, but then also once a quarter, to really solve these more overarching issues and help figure out where we can make things better. Obviously, if you have more frequent issues than that, and lack of communication, I think even just getting a standing meeting with a few of the department leads that you're trying to sync up would be helpful. And continuing to harp on this, but those cross-functional teams that understand really how you're operating as a startup, what happens before you do your work, what happens after you do your work, and how do all departments work together to develop and deliver a service or a product together is always important. So I would say, I'm just looking here. Use sales, use HubSpot to manage their work. I have an integration for HubSpot that sends every task to Asana because we use Asana, and then we actually have a product called Birdseye that we've been using internally here. So it sends all my tasks from HubSpot to Birdseye, and it's onto an Asana board. So there are some integrations and things with Zapier that you could do that would help create some visibility if you're looking for those things. But I would say as a whole, like tearing down the walls between departments is important, and making sure you have time to sync together, and having that integrator has been really helpful for us to identify those issues that are maybe lingering from department to department or happening between departments, and there really needs to be a discussion around, hey, here's the issue, how do we solve it, what's the best path forward. So more, and that integrator most often so Eric is our integrator, and he's the COO or the chief operating officer that really helps to operationalize what we're doing at Headway.
Yeah, and I would say like too, if they're using HubSpot, I don't know if you're a user within that tool or not, but there's a pretty like great like customer support team at HubSpot. Like if you have a question, you can start in chat, and if it's really specific, they'll hop on a call with you and help you find the solution. I mean, especially if you're paying for like a pro, or I can't remember what the tiers are called, but their plans are quite expensive, and they're definitely like, the support's worth your time. So you're paying for that. So I would lean into their customer support if you're looking to do something really specific or wondering if they can even do it for you. I know it's always like, it seems like such a simple thing sometimes, like, oh, just talk to customer support, but not all teams have the best customer support. But HubSpot's pretty good and pretty fast, actually. They usually, in the chat tool, like within there, they'll answer within a minute usually, and then get you connected with the right person, or they'll dig into it and help you find a solution. So, yeah.
Yeah, that goes with EOS. I was just going to mention the book real quick if anyone was interested. There's a book that introduces EOS. It's called What the Heck is EOS? There's also a book called Traction that goes through a story. Traction and Rocket Fuel, one of them, I forget which one, goes through a story of a company implementing it, a startup implementing EOS inside of their company, and the conversations that happen and all of those things. So I would definitely look into that, or pick it up on audio, or even dig into EOS and some of the resources they have. But they have a system that tries to connect the departments around company goals, connect data through scorecards, and really give more visibility to each person around where they can work better together. So
Awesome. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. I think we can wrap things up for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. We had already two live streams this week, so it's pretty crazy. This is number 3 for me this week, and then there's one more tomorrow morning. So if you're watching and you're a developer, Jacob from our development team will be talking about headless CMS and building sites around those, and what are the options, and how do you compare them, and how do you know what's best for your project. So that'll be happening tomorrow. So if you head to our we'll be streaming on YouTube. So if you're here, be sure to subscribe. Otherwise, you can head to headway.io and head to our events page, and you can register there as well. We'll be putting up April events very soon, hopefully by the end of the week. Thanks for sharing the link, Andrew. And we have a lot of great things coming up. So be on the lookout, and we'll be back here again same time next week. So if you have questions, or if you want to just like listen in and learn from other folks that are asking questions, it's all super helpful, and we're here to help. So awesome. Anything else you want to share, Andrew?
No, that's good. I think we mentioned at the start of the call, but if you're still watching, going back and watching our Hack Week pitches would be interesting. So we had 3 teams get formed around ideas that everyone could drive forward, and I'm trying to look for the link right now. But essentially, a pitch from idea. It was really 4 days. I think we shared that.
I know, technically it's 4 days. Yeah.
Monday afternoon to Friday at 1:30 or so. But interesting to see kind of what progress you can make in a week with a cross-functional team. We keep talking about that, but I think it's so important to have all facets of your startup on the same page, and you can do a lot together. So.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of the presentations Friday was just seeing how everyone told their story for their product. Like everyone kind of had a different kind of like slant or storyline of like how they did their deck. And I think that's something to be said too. Like not every deck needs to be the same. Like work with what you have, that kind of stuff. So yeah, just kind of it's interesting to see that. So yeah, hopefully everyone watch it. There's timestamps on that, so you can scrub through the things you want to watch, so you're not watching the whole. I think it's like over 2 hours, but you can skip to the segments that you want to watch. So, but yeah, awesome. All right. Well, everybody take care and have a great week.